Good day, everyone. I am Christina Cassandra M. Palamata, and I am gonna be your reporter for the part 2 of Rollo May's Existential Psychology. And these are the concepts that I'm gonna be reporting to you guys. So the first one is care, love, and will. The next one is freedom and destiny. I've also included May's stages of development, the power of myth, psychopathology, related research, and lastly, the critique of May. Care, love, and will. So, in the case of Philip, which I believe Ms. Blanco already talked about in her report, so dili na lang nako siya ingon guys ha, kay kabalo ko nga na jud may idea ani. So there, Philip gave Nicole a job and money because he felt a duty to take care of her, just like what he did with his previous wives, his mother, and his sister. But according to Professor May, Philip never really truly learned to care for them. Why? Because for Professor May, to care for someone means to recognize that person as a fellow human being, to identify with that person's pain or joy, guilt or pity. And Mr. May was also quoted here saying, care is a state which one does matter. So, if you are still wondering na nung nakaingon si Mr. May ato, we will further talk about the case of Philip in the next slides. So, let's proceed. To love means to care, to recognize the essential humanity of the other person, to have an active regard for that person's development. So to care for someone does not equal love, but it is the source of love. Care is the source of love. And without care, there can be no love. Only sentimentality or transient sexual arousal. So, motigingon ni Professor May. And another concept that we will define is the concept of will. May called will the capacity to organize oneself so that movement in a certain direction or toward a certain goal may take place. Care is also the source of will. So, Professor May distinguished between will and wish. So, kamo na lang pause ani guys kay kung gusto mo makabalo sa ilang difference kay dili na lang na ako ni further elaborate. So, the next concept is union of love and will. So, kaning book dere, as you can see on the right side, this is the most famous work of Rollo May. Award-winning kayo siya as mentioned in the biography of Rollo May. So, May claimed that modern society is suffering from an unhealthy division of love and will. Love become associated with essential love or sex, whereas will has become to mean a dogged determination of willpower. So, it is also pointed out that there are biological reasons why love and will are separated. When children first come into the world, they are at one with the universe, or katubitaw sa modes, which we call the Umwelt, their mother, or the Mitwelt, and themselves, or the Eigenwelt. Our needs are met without self-conscious effort on our part, kay lagi mga baby pa, as biologically in early condition of nursing at the mother's breast. This is the first freedom, the first yes. But later, as we begin to develop, it manifests itself as opposition, the first no. The no here should not be seen as a statement of defiance or against the parents, but rather as a positive assertion of self. Nag-assert ang isa ka bata sa iyahang kaugalingon. But unfortunately, parents often interpret this no negatively and therefore stifle the child's self-assertion. And as a result, children learn to disassociate will from the blissful love they had previously enjoyed. Our task, said May, is to unite love and will, though it is not easy, but it is possible. And for the mature person, both love and will mean reaching out toward another person, Both involve care, both necessitate choice, both imply action, and both require responsibility. So, forms of love. May identify 4 kinds of love in Western tradition. So, we have our first one, which is sex. So, sex is a biological function that can be satisfied through sexual intercourse or some other release of sexual tension. So, muni siya ato ang physiological need ni si sex. So, it still remains the power of procreation because how can human race kanang multiply and reproduce without sex? Diba? And the drive which perpetuates the race, the source at once of the human's being most intense pleasure and his or her most pervasive anxiety. So, nganong nahimo mang anxiety si sex? So, many pointed out that the society went from a period when having sex was fraught, katong sa Victorian period, which is kanang grabe og suppression bitaw sa sexual activities, kanang grabe og guilt og anxiety ato nga time. Pero karon, during the 1920s, kanang it suddenly came into the open and much of the Western society was preoccupied with it. And muna to, nag-start na nga, not having sex brought about guilt and anxiety. So, the next form of love is eros. So, kung si sex kay, physiological desire, si eros naman is the psychological desire. And it seeks procreation or creation through an enduring union with a loved one. So, parehaan nila diring pictures nga naa sa right portions of slide. So, we must not confuse eros with sex because eros is making love. Sex is manipulating organs. Eros is wish to establish a lasting union while sex is the desire to experience pleasure. Eros takes wings from human imagination and is forever transcending all techniques, giving the laugh to all the how-to books by gaily swinging into orbit above our mechanical rules. So, Eros is built on care and tenderness, and it longs to establish an enduring union with the other person, such that both partners experience delight and passion, and both are broadened and deepened by the experience. So, the next form of love is we have philia. Si eros ang salvation of sex and is built on the foundation of philia, that is an intimate non-sexual friendship between two people. So, philia, kanang imong love sa imong siblings, imong love para sa imong kanang intimate friends, ganon. Philia does not require that we do anything for the beloved. So, contrary to popular beliefs, no? So, dili siya requirement, except we should accept him, we should accept her, be with him or her, enjoy him or her. It is friendship in the simplest, most direct terms. So, philia is the gradual relaxed development of true friendship and is a prerequisite for the enduring union of two people. Munang foundation siya sa eros. Just as eros depends on philia, so philia needs agape. So this is the last form of love according to May. So May define agape as esteem for the other, para sa love ni God para sa atua. The concern for the other's welfare beyond any gain that one can get out of it. Disinterested love, typically the love of God for men. Pwede po, kaya po nibuhatan sa mga tao. So, para sa to sa libro, I think that was Mother Teresa. So, that is an example of agape. And agape does not depend on any behaviors or characteristics of the other person. In this sense, it is undeserved and unconditional. So, the next concept of Rollo May is freedom and destiny. A blend of the four forms of love, sex, eros, philia, and agape, requires both self-assertion and an affirmation of the other person. It also requires an assertion of one's freedom and a confrontation with one's destiny. Healthy individuals are able both to assume their freedom and to face their destiny. So, freedom defined. In an early definition, May said that freedom is the individual's capacity to know that he is the determined one. So, kaning word na determined dire, later on, tawago na siya ni May og destiny. Freedom comes from our understanding of our destiny. Freedom to understand that death is a possibility sa iskang unsang higayon. Bisan babae ta, bisan lalaki, na atay inherent weaknesses that includes kanang early childhood experiences dispose us towards certain patterns of behavior. So, makita nimo sa ideas ni Rollo May ang influence pod ni Freud. Freedom entails being able to harbor different possibilities in one's mind even though it is not clear at that moment which way one must act. This condition often leads to increases in anxiety, but it is normal anxiety, the kind that healthy people welcome and are able to manage. So, freedom is man's capacity to take a hand in his own development. It is our capacity to mold ourselves. So, there are two forms of freedom which may recognize freedom of doing and freedom of being. So, existential freedom should not be identified with existential philosophy. So, na-mention naman to kaganina sa part 1, no? What is existential philosophy? So, unlike the philosophical definition of existential psychology, existential freedom is the freedom of doing. So, imagine na lang nimo nga kaning siyang existential freedom kay free ka mag-travel across kanang the states or asa ba ka gusto mo adto, para sa freedom to vote, and so on and so forth. And on a more trivial scale, they are free to push their sa mall good sa kadaghan og choices na kuan nganong kana man jud ang imuhang gipunit because naa kay existential freedom. So existential freedom then is the freedom to act on the choices that one makes. So, the next form of freedom is essential freedom. So, kung si existential freedom kay freedom of doing, kanina po siya kay freedom of being. Existential freedom often makes essential freedom more difficult. So, why? So, an example is, kanabitong mga inmates, mga prisoners sa prisuhan, kanang kaya na nila mag-speak mismo sa ilang gusto iingon, kanang kaya na nila ma-express ilahang inner freedom despite sa pagiging existentially confined sila kay natanggalan naman sila sa ilang freedom mag-travel, mag-choose, pero ang ilahang essential freedom kay mura bitaw siya og mas naga-proliferate noon sa sulod. Mooto nga kanang sa atong pananaw, physical confinement or the denial of liberty seems to allow people to face their destiny and to gain their freedom of being. So kato noong mga kanang walay existential freedom, sila noon ang murag na ay essential freedom. Kay kanang pagka-lock nila sa ilahang existential freedom, murag nakagain sila og freedom of being. Mao to nga in 1981 may ask, do we get to essential freedom only when our everyday existence is interrupted? Perhaps itong nagka-COVID-19 no, na wala ato ang existential freedom. So daghan og kanang naghuna-huna sa ilahang essential freedom. So anak po siya, gitubag po ni ilahang kagalingan ng question, and his answer was no. One need not be in prison to attain essential freedom. That is freedom of being. Anak po si Rollo may na, ang destiny mismo ang atong prisuhan. Diha na confine our concentration camp that allows us to be less concerned with freedom of doing and more concerned with essential freedom. So, what is destiny? So, in 1981, they defined destiny as the design of the universe, speaking through the design of each one of us. Our ultimate destiny is death, but on a lesser scale, our destiny includes other biological properties such as intelligence, atong gender, atong kadakon, and strength, and genetic predisposition towards certain illnesses. So, muna ito ang destiny. Pero ato yung ultimate destiny is death. Destiny does not mean preordained or foredoomed. Parehas good atong mantra nila as stated in the part 1 of this theory na existence precedes essence. So, ato siya. Destiny does not mean preordained or foredoomed. It is our destination, our terminus, and our goal. We cannot erase our destiny, but we can choose how we shall respond, how we shall live out our talents which confront us. And, dili na tayo naabot na siya sa case ni Philip. Actually, daghan og example si Professor May sa iyang patients, including Mrs. Hutchins, but for now, we will just focus on the case of Philip. So, Philip's destiny. When Philip the architect, immobilized by his relationship with Nicole, first sought Rollo as his therapist, he was paralyzed with inaction because he had refused to accept his destiny. Kanang miska na affair si Nicole, pero kanang gina-reassure hapon siya ni Nicole na kanang it was meaningless, kanang wala to niya gi-value ng mga affairs. Si Philip gihapon niyang love, he felt very paralyzed. Si Philip. And like other people, he had the freedom to change his destiny. But first, he had to recognize his biological, social, and psychological limitations. And then, he had to possess the courage to make choices within those limitations. So, pareha itong sa part 1 na mag-ugat atong sense of insignificance and alienation when we lack the courage to face our destiny. So, pareha po ni Philip, no? And in the process of fleeing from our destiny, we give up much of our freedom. Having negated that freedom, we likewise run away from our responsibility. Not being willing to make these choices, we lose sight of who we are and develop a sense of insignificance and alienation. So, mukod ni ang battle ni Philip. His denial of his destiny left him resentful and confused. His inability or unwillingness to face his destiny robbed him of the freedom and kept him tied to his mother. So, sa mapansin nato no kay kanang naay pattern sa behavior ni Philip from his mother to his sister to his previous wives. He had 2 divorces, unfortunately, then Nicole. So, maadyo siya kanang kanang sense nga kanang mag-take care good sa kanang mga crazy, quote-unquote, crazy women. So, his inability or unwillingness to face his destiny robbed him of the freedom and kept him tied to his mother. After several weeks of psychotherapy, Nang kaluyan with Jude, Philip came to terms with his destiny. He began to be able to express his anger, to feel less trapped in his relationship with Nicole, and to become more aware of his possibilities. So, naka-state pod sa kung usay mga techniques ni Professor May para ma-achieve ni Philip. So, mao to na nakita na niya ang positive nga nahimo sa iyang mother towards him, and kanang nahimong positive na gud iyang mga experience. Ay dili nahimong positive. More getting state the objective facts of his childhood had not changed. Katong mga naagian niya sa una pa lang, wala to na usab, but his subjective perceptions had. So, importante jud ang duha, the balance of the objective and subjective na experience sa isa ka tao. So, mao to siya, itong makatabang kay Philip. And lastly, and kaluyan lang jud, Philip gained his freedom of being. Freedom of being, his essential freedom. So, I've also included, nakita lang po na ko niya as I was searching about Mr. May. So, this is his stages of development. So, these should not be thought of as benchmarks. Rather, they are better thought of as phases that coexist with the human experience. In short, this is age salient, not age dependent. So, first, we have innocence. So, kaning baby dere. So, innocent kaayo siya. So, we often think of innocence sa kanang infants, toddlers, pero pwede ni siya kanang misang asa nga sa tawag ani stage. So, the pre-egoic, pre-self-conscious stage of the infant, the innocent is pre-moral. It is neither good nor bad, only doing what he or she must do in order to survive. Mostly, though, thought of as children, but can happen, as I have said earlier, with adults who are not caught up in the drama of life. So, sana all. And the other stage is rebellion. Applies to any stage of life when a person is developing an ego and becoming more self-aware. So, kato tingali ning, dili tingali. Kanang, it is under katong sa no good, the first no, katong dili siya tanaw na negativity. Pero, rebellious person, but the rebellious person wants freedom but does not yet understand the responsibility that goes with it. Mostly happens when a child learns to say no. Tama na dito. Or the teenage years. Self-assertion na mahitabo ba. The next stage of development is ordinary, the normal adult ego, conventional and a little boring. This person has learned responsibility but finds it too demanding and so seeks refuge in conformity and traditional values. Mag-conform sila. And the fourth is creative. So, kaning nasa picture, I hope you recognize this guy. He is Pablo Picasso. He is considered also as an existential. Perhaps itong na-mention lagi sa first part. Because, lang. Authentic adult, the existential stage beyond ego and self-actualizing. This is the person who accepts destiny, faces anxiety and courage, and isn't afraid to be a little different. So, grabe jud ka different si Picasso, dili siya little different. So, naka-gain siya of freedom of being. Okay, gi-smash jud niya ang kanang mga rules sa art. During this stage, one grows most as a human being. The next is the power of myth. For many years, May was concerned with the powerful effects of myths on individuals and culture, and May believed that our current society is lacking the myths we need. So, This concern culminated in his book The Cry for Myth in 1991. Lacking myths to believe in, people of Western civilization have turned to cults, drug addiction, and popular culture in a vain effort to find meaning in their lives. So May added that myths are not falsehoods, rather they are conscious and unconscious belief systems that provide explanations for personal and social problems. So even kita sa atong mga isig kaugalingong baryo, barangay, munisipalidad, even diri sa tibuok Pilipinas, we have our own myths that unify our society. These belief systems provide explanations for personal and social problems nga nagaabot. So myths are the stories that unify a society. So as I have said earlier, they are essential to the process of keeping our souls alive and bringing us new meaning in a difficult and often meaningless world. They believe that people communicate with one another on two levels, namely rationalistic language and myths. People use myths to transcend the immediate conflict situation, to expand self-awareness, and to search for identity. And the most famous na kanang perminti maistoryahan jud is ang Oedipus story. So we believe that the Oedipus story is a powerful myth in our culture because it contains elements of existential crisis common to everyone. These crises include birth, separation or exile from parents and home, sexual union with the parents and hostility toward the other, the assertion of independence and the search for identity, and death. So, the Oedipus meaning has meaning for people because it deals with each of the 5 crises katong kaning naa diri. Like Oedipus, pareha nato, people are moved from their mother and father and are driven by the need for self-knowledge. Moto, di ba? Gibulag man siya sa iyang mother and father para malikayan tong iyang katong prophecy. Tapos naabot sa point na abot si Oedipus sa point sa self-knowledge, pero iyang nabalaan ni tinuod kay dili jud di ay. So, daghan kaayog elements sa story na maka-relate ang kanang kita tanan. These concepts are common to us. People struggle for self-identity. However, it's not easy and it may even result in tragedy as it did for Oedipus when he insisted on knowing the truth about his origins. So, bisan wrong siya nag-insist jud siya nga tama to siya mo ni hiyang parents. After being told that he killed his father and married his mother, Oedipus put out his eyes, depriving himself of the ability to see, that is, to be aware or to be conscious. Pero, kaninga narration ni Oedipus, kay wala siya nag-end sa denial of consciousness. So, Oedipus once again is exiled and experience may saw as symbolic of people's own isolation and ostracism. As an old man, Oedipus is seen contemplating his tragic sufferings and accepting responsibility for killing his father and marrying his mother. So, mooto iyahang gi-accept ang responsibility. His meditations during old age bring him peace and understanding and the ability to accept death with grace. And the central themes of Oedipus's life, birth, exile, and separation, identity, incest, and patricide. Actually, he had 4 children with his mother, patricide when he killed his father, repression of guilt, katong gi-exile niya yung kaugalingon, and finally, conscious meditation and death. Touch everyone and make this myth a potentially powerful healing force in people's lives. Like archetypes katong kay Jung, myths can contribute to psychological growth if people will embrace them and allow them to open up a new reality. However, tragically, many people deny their universal myths and thus risk alienation, apathy, and emptiness. the principal ingredients of psychopathology. Unang hisgutan na to next, which is psychopathology. According to me, apathy and emptiness are the malice of modern times. When people deny their destiny or abandon their myths, they lose their purpose for being. They become directionless. Without some goal or destination, people become sick and engage in a variety of self-defeating and self-destructive behaviors. Many people in modern Western societies feel alienated from the world or the Umwelt, from others or the Mitwelt, and especially from themselves or the Eigenwelt. They feel insignificant in a world that increasingly dehumanizes the individual. This sense of apathy and to a state of this sense of insignificance leads to apathy and to a state of diminished consciousness. So, mula dito katong sa part 1 na gi-mention nga karon nga time kay dako na kayo ang dehumanize sa mga tao. Kaya ani nandiri. So, many saw psychopathology as lack of communication, the inability to know others, and to share oneself with them. Psychologically disturbed individuals deny their destiny and thus lose their freedom. So, nasi psychopathology na apod si psychotherapy. So, unlike the others, for example, unlike Freud, Adler, Rogers, and other clinically oriented personality theorists, May did not establish a school of psychotherapy with avid followers and identifiable techniques. Instead, he suggested that psychotherapy should make people more human. That is, help them expand their consciousness so that they will be in a better position to make choices. Because, katupang mentioned sa first part, niya na si May na, the more conscious of our being we are, the more spontaneous and creative we will be, and the more capable we will be of choosing our plans and reaching our goals. So, muni ang goal pod sa psychotherapy ni May, to help expand our consciousness. May believe that the purpose of psychotherapy is to set people free. When patients become more free, pareha ni Philip, more human, their neurotic symptoms usually disappear. Their neurotic anxiety gives way to normal anxiety, and their neurotic guilt is replaced by normal guilt. May insisted that psychotherapy must be concerned with helping people experience their existence, and that relieving symptoms is merely a byproduct of that experience. Existential theorists have no special set of techniques or methods that can be applied to all patients. Instead, they have only themselves, their own humanity to offer, because nato isa ka nag-influence pod kay May, nato sa biography of May nga ang therapy is kanang experience siya both para sa therapist o sa patient. Kanang therapy sila para sa ilaha both. Ana siya. Munang ang existential psychologist, ana to sila nga, they only have themselves, their own humanity to offer. May also describe therapy as partly religion, because si May pod kay apo siya influences sa religious nga part, partly science, and partly friendship. So, many kinds of techniques na ginagamit sa mga existential psych, pwede cognitive behavioral, psychoanalysis, Rogerian, or Gestalt. Daghan siya og techniques. Related research, Rollo May's theory, since existential siya, moderately influential lang siya as a method of psychotherapy. but it has sparked almost no direct empirical research. Mauto siya kay the state of affairs is no doubt related to the critical stance that may adopted toward objective and quantitative measurement. So, any theory nga nag-emphasize the connection between subject and object and the uniqueness of each individual kay dili man siya conductive to large sample research with experimental or questionnaire design. So, in fact, may argue that modern science is too rationalistic, too objective, and that a new science is needed in order to grasp the total living person. So, one existential topic to receive some empirical attention has been existential anxiety. Despite all, naagihapoy na empirical studies sa existential anxiety. When events threaten our physical or psychological existence, we experience existential anxiety. So, naman to'y naka-mention po sa previous concepts ganina of anxiety. And the strongest among the threats to our existence is death. An existent approach to the study of terror and death has carried over into terror management. Warning, na lang ko daan kay basin, na inappropriate images, basta hindi mo ganahan, guys. Pero this is the point sa katong research kanang anything na mag-remind sa ato ang animal nature kay siya function of defending against the existential threat posed by our inevitable death. So this was an episode of Vox. I think I watched this pila na ka-years, tapos wala pa ko naka-encounter of existential psych ato. Murag isa ka week jud ko, wala gyud nahimutang. Mas na-realize na ko ang inevitability of death. Pero ang research aning mortality salience and denial of our animal nature, dili lang siya lacking sa kanang parehas kaning mga corpse or unsa nga mga luod, kanang apil na kanang breastfeeding, kanang mo po na ilahang ginastadihan. The research based on terror management theory and disgust sensitivity has developed into an impressive body of work that points to the general conclusion that human disgust atong pagkaluod sa mga butang-butang, particularly disgust related to human features that remind us of our animal nature, serves the function of defending against the existential threat posed by our inevitable death. So, since makabalo na ta nga kanang mamatay jud ta, so kanang nanay profound realization nga inevitable jud ang death. So, atong defense jud mostly para sa ako kay ang goal jud nako kay is to delay death as much as possible, as long as possible di ay munang mag-exercise, magkaon og healthy. So, apil ko na sa related researches sa existential psychology. So, fitness as a defense against mortality awareness. Terror management theory actively argues for two distinct categories of defense against death, namely conscious and unconscious. The conscious defenses are also referred to as proximal defenses. So, kung gusto mo og guys, nara gyapon ang mas detailed information about aning research sa atong ebook. And when one's death is unconsciously activated, then distal defenses become activated. This involves identifying with and defending cultural beliefs and ideologies and boosting one's self-esteem. The results confirm the importance of distinguishing between proximal conscious and distal unconscious defenses against death. They also confirm the idea that people may well be motivated to undertake behaviors that fight against death and disease, namely exercise, when their own mortality is made salient, especially if exercise is a relevant and important source of their self-esteem. And lastly, naabot ra jud ta critique of May. Si Mr. May, actually daghan jud kay siya video sa YouTube, guys. Kanang amazing lang ang makakita. So, you can check that out too. So, anywho, existentialism is general and May psychology in particular have been criticized as being anti-intellectual and anti-theoretical. Usahay kay maano pa siya kay dili siya wala po siya nabilong sa philosophy, usahay kay ingnan po siya nga wala siya nabilong sa psychology. Pero si Professor May, of course, nadyo siya yung mga nasa'y tawag mga rebuttals. Ay siya nga, may acknowledge the claim that his views did not conform to the traditional concept of theory, but he staunchly defended his psychology against the charge of being anti-intellectual or anti-scientific. So, si Professor May. And he also pointed to the sterility of conventional scientific methods and their inability to unlock the ontological character of willing, caring, and acting human beings. And sa katong mga criteria na gisukdan po sa other previous theories that we had, number 1, May's ideas generated scientific research receives a very low score. May's theory must be rated very low in falsifiability. May's philosophically oriented psychology would receive an average rating on helping organize what is currently known about human nature. 4th, May's theory is quite weak in the practical guide to action criterion. Kay medyo slippery man good say tawag medyo lisod sabto niyang concepts pero pag maano kay profound pud kaayo siya. May's existential psychology falls short on the criterion of internal consistency. So, mga definitions, mga ana-ana. The final criterion of a useful theory is parsimony, and May psychology receives a moderate rating. On his concept of humanity, May is rated high on the dimension of free will. High kaayo kay freedom, natay freedom, according to Mr. May. May's theory was not pessimistic. Even the influence of Freud, wala na himong pessimistic si Professor May. He clearly favored teleology over causality. Teleology siguro sa influence ni Tillich. And May assumed moderate stance on the issue of conscious versus unconscious forces in personality development. And he also took an intermediate position on social versus biological influences. On the dimension of uniqueness versus similarities, May's views of humanity definitely leans toward uniqueness. Unique kaayo ang theory ni Professor May. And that ends for my report, guys. Thank you very much for references. These are my references. Malagi to, guys. You can check out other video of Mr. May as in kana siya jud mismo nag-ingon. Daghan kaayo sa YouTube, guys. It's very awesome to watch. So, thank you for listening. Unta nakahuman mo. And thank you very much. Bye.